Of the budget, Michael, I just want to bring in Brid Smith here. Just on the question of the USC, Sinn Fein has made months of campaigning saying that the USC is something that should be retained. We can't hollow out the base. People Before Profit finds itself in the same room as Fine Gael saying it should be axed. Why is that?
Well, we don't find ourselves quite in the same room. In fact, we're outside the room when it comes to how overall both Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and indeed Sinn Féin look at what's available to us to budget on, because they constrain us within this idea of a fiscal space, whether it's 1.2 or 1.3 billion. We disregard that as total nonsense. There is much more wealth in the country that we can access, much more availability to the economy by way of taxation, and by way of accessing stuff that's due to us, like the effective rate of 12.5% corporation tax. So in the context of getting back much more wealth from those who have it at the very top and taxing the corporations and the Irish financial services sector where all the financial transactions come through, in that context, we believe it's time to reduce the USC and the burden on workers. And that's the context in which we argued it, not in the context of a paltry 1.3 billion of a fiscal space, which is a complete false perception of the economy.
Brid Smith, where do you stand on this? Is this
I totally support the ASTI's demand for equal pay for equal work, which is what it boils down to.
But it's inside Lansdowne Road. Can you not sort it out inside the negotiation system?
The ASTI voted to stay outside Lansdowne Road, and any trade union have an organisation which represents them and have the right to say where they stand on these deals. They, along with the Gardaí, are outside Lansdowne Road. Now, what appears to be happening is that the government are attempting to isolate the ASTI and to hammer them so that they can have they can keep them in a box. They'll deal with the Gardaí, but they won't deal with the teachers. What you're saying is you want to disadvantage those people who stayed inside the Lansdowne Host Agreement and took the pain? No, not at all, because I believe that the Lansdowne Road Agreement has put a real noose around the neck of public sector workers. I know public sector workers also believe this, despite what the leaders of trade unions might say. The recent deal that was done with the INTO and the TUI did not go back to ballot to its members. It was decided to accept it by the leadership, not by the membership. And I don't know if any members of Owen's party were in at the briefings we had from young teachers who are at the receiving end of this pay inequality, as are young nurses, as are young Gardaí.
OK, Michael McGrath. Brian Dowling reporting there. Brid Smith, if I can start with you. One reading of that analysis would be that AAA PPP is gone as far as it can go, and basically it's all downhill from here on.
That is one reading of it, indeed. Another reading of the analysis is that just post-budget, the analysis shows that people, if you look at the question of wealth and tax on wealth, that people still feel that it's fair to put a higher tax on wealth. The other thing to say about it is sometimes I wonder the context in which people are asked the questions. So, for example, are there many Irish people out there who know that there is 626 billion worth of wealth in this country overall? The vast majority of that is not taxed. And figures that we got from the CSO and from the Department of Finance show us that gross wealth goes untaxed largely. It's income that is taxed, and it's financial transactions that are taxed, but at a very, very low level. Income obviously is taxed at different levels. But the argument I would put to people is that if you just look at the centre in terms of, popular support in the polls today, where people are up and down, and there's the centre parties are up a bit and the left parties are down a bit, then that is a snapshot in time. But time moves on very quickly, and no sooner was the ink dry on the budget than 80% of teachers voted to go out on strike. Next week, nurses are meeting over the question of their pay, and the question of water charges and repeal the 8th is back on the agenda, and they will lead to big demonstrations and to the mobilisation of people who do support the left. So it's a fluid situation, and what is likely to happen globally is another major economic recession, and should that hit, we will see left and right ground shift again. The point is to have a left voice there for people who do feel that there's gross inequality and that they want to do something to see it adjusted. And
probably the big danger to the economy is Brexit, and we'll come up against that in part 3.
Absolutely agreed that TDs are way overpaid. 87,500 a year, I think, is a ridiculous wage for somebody who's supposed to be representing. Vast majority of workers out there do not ever see the light of day, this sort of money. And I don't believe that either as a trade union leader, many of whom are paid very highly, or as a TD representing people, you should be paid so much that puts you outside the real material level at which they're at. That's why we only take the average industrial wage in people before profit AAA, and that's why we will be saying, if you give back that money to Michael Noonan, and Michael Fitzmaurice and Matty McGrath are all trying to get the moral high ground on this. Oh, I'm not taking it. But they actually do take 87.5. They're not going to take the extra bit. Give it back to Michael Noonan, and he's likely to use it to bail out banks or to incentivise developers. It will not go to SNAs or nurses or teachers who more deserve it, or indeed young people on the dole who only got $270 a week of an increase.
Just because
so
we mentioned Michael Noonan,
totally hypocritical about pay.
We have heard of reports over the weekend, I think it was the Irish Independent, saying that 5 of the 60 mushroom producers in Ireland has already gone under the water because of Brexit. From a left point of view, what are the types of measures that could be put in place to support business who are being hit by the sterling exchange?
Well, the first thing people need to realise that this happened because currency speculators shifted vast amount of money after Theresa May's speech. So the currency speculators who buy and sell mammoth amounts, billions amounts of sterling, shift it because of a political speech that's made, and they get away with that without...
That's the world we live in.
That's the world we live in, and unfortunately that's the world we have to address, which is why we constantly argue that there has to be a financial and transactions tax put on the IFSC. And if they put that tax on transactions at the IFSC, that money could be used to support jobs. Because why should workers take the pain? Why, when currency speculators
the financial transaction tax could take months, if not years, to come in? We're talking about mushroom companies that are already going under. So what would people before profit, how would you be able to support those businesses in border regions to be able to stay in business now?
Well, we don't have any measures or money to support them to stay in business now, but it goes to the heart of the problems with capitalism, that global currency speculators can make workers pay and pay and pay and cause such pain for people, and it shouldn't be allowed to happen. We have it in our budget for the last 5 years that there should be a tax on the IFSC, and if you had that tax in place, you could use that money to support workers who are being hit. Which, by the way, I just find it a bit odd that Sinn Fein are now supporting remaining in the EU when they campaigned against going into it, when they campaigned against Lisbon, when they campaigned against Nice, when they argued constantly that the EU was bad for workers, was bad for our sovereignty, and now they're bending over backwards to argue